Okay, guys, I'm sorry that this is getting posted so late. I was trying to wait till Jen took a good nap today, and he is not wanting to take a good nap today. So I'm gonna try to do this all in one take, but that probably won't happen because I'm really awkward when I film these videos. Anyway, we're still in Romans chapter, what chapter is it in the Romans for you book? Chapter 4, God's sovereignty, and then the Bible is Romans 9, verses 14 through 29. And so I'm going to start reading verses 14 through 18, and we're just going to, actually, you know what, I'm going to read the whole thing. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, what shall we say then? Is there injustice on God's part? By no means, for he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. So then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whomever he wills. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory, even us whom he has called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles, as indeed he says in Hosea, those who were not my people I will call my people, and her who was not beloved I will call beloved. And in the very place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they will be called sons of the living God. And Isaiah cries out concerning Israel, though the number of the sons of Israel be as the sand of the sea, only a remnant of them will be saved. For the Lord will carry out his sentence upon the earth fully and without delay. And as Isaiah predicted, if the Lord of hosts has not left us offspring, we would have been like Sodom and became like Gomorrah. Okay, so initially in verses 14 through 18, Paul's kind of addressing the question that I've heard atheists and Christians bring up, which is it unfair of God that he chooses people to go to heaven and some to hell? Is it fair that he chooses to soften some hearts and not others? Which this question is more from a Calvinist point of view. If your theological point of view is more on the Arminianism side, then your question's probably more like, is it unfair that God creates people that he knows are going to go to hell? Or is it fair for him to create people that he knows are not going to choose him? And the answer is that he is not being unfair, because salvation is a free gift. Ephesians 2:8 tells us that's from the grace of God that we've been saved through faith. And it's not of our doing, it's just a free gift from God. Mercy on us is completely undeserved, and so he is free to give some of it, or none of it, or all of it. Because, the punishment for sin is death. Just one sin, the punishment is death. But it's his mercy that allows us to be able to be in heaven with him someday, to be saved, to trust in God, and to know him. Just like this is all the examples that you're able to give, like when you describe the Trinity, none of our earthly examples can ever compare to God and how great he is. But one example I've seen is like, what's if a rich person was to donate to charities or to give out scholarships? It's their free wealth, it's their wealth, and they're able to disperse of it how they want. They can, give to certain charities and not to others. They can give to certain students and not to a different student, and it's still completely fair for them to not give to everybody, because it's their money. It's God's mercy, and he can give it how he chooses to. Okay. Then verse 15, it says that God has compassion on who he wants to have compassion on, and God also hardens the hearts of those he wants to harden. I'll talk more about hardening hearts in a minute, but I'm actually going to skip to verse 23 for a second. Romans 9:23 says, "In order to make known the riches of his glory for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory." So this is part of how God shows his glory, is by having mercy on some and passing over others. Because, he could just pass over all of us and that'd still be perfectly fair, but he doesn't, because he is a loving and merciful God. But in order to still be just, that's why Jesus had to die for us, because there still has to be payment for our sins. And so how thankful are we for that? So awesome. But into hardening hearts. So in this passage, it starts to talk about the story of Moses and Pharaoh. And what you may not have realized reading it is, in some verses, the Romans for You book by Tim Keller points this out. Some verses it says God hardened his heart, and then in some verses it actually says that Pharaoh hardened his own heart. So both are definitely possible. But so for example, in Exodus 7:3 it says, "But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt." And that's where that verse stops. But but in Exodus 8:32 it says, "But Pharaoh hardened his heart this time also, and did not let the people go." So I think this definitely is revealing of that we do have some free will and we do have some responsibility in all of this. It's not just that God picks and chooses us and that we do absolutely nothing. We do nothing to add to our salvation. But I'm trying to say that we can choose to not answer God's call. But that also our free will and our ability to choose, that's another gift that God gives us. God allows that to happen because God is sovereign. He is all powerful, and he could not let us. We could just, kind of be like robots, that he completely controls every single thing that we do and every decision and every thought that we make, but he doesn't. He gives us that gift. He gives us the free gift of salvation and of being able to make some choices in our time here on earth. I think I talked about this in my Zoom chat a little bit, if you were on it last time. I keep wanting to say last week, but it was 2 weeks ago. But in the back of the Romans for You book, if you have it, on page 199, it has an appendix of the doctrines of God's sovereignty and election. I think it's really helpful in making sense of all these things, but I'll read a couple of the headlines. Is that everything that happens is under God's direction, but all of our choices are free acts, and that we are responsible for them. But then it also goes on to say that people who choose God do so because God has opened their hearts, and people who fail to do so because he has closed their hearts. So in order for you to become saved, there does need to be an opening or a softening of your heart. And I encourage you guys to pray for your unsaved friends, that God would do that. That's such a great thing to pray, that he would soften the hearts of those who don't know Jesus. Anyways, I'm going to keep going. We're going to go all the way back for a second to Romans 1:24. 1 second, I need to go back to it. I'm just going to give you a summary. But we've talked about this as one of the way that God has his wrath on earth today, is that he gives us over to our sinful desires. So one thing that doesn't always work out for us is that we are able to make bad decisions. And we are able to go, choose temptation over God's will for us. And so, you know what? Honestly, sometimes that stinks because we are human and oftentimes we make bad decisions. But thank God that he has paid for all of those sins that we're going to commit today and in the past and in the future. And then I'm going to go, I'm sorry, this is kind of all over the place, but Romans 9:22, I can read that because I already have it up. Okay. It says, what if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? So what does that mean? It means that God is the author of our salvation, but we are the authors of our own damnation. We make that choice ourselves. Evil people aren't made evil by God, but he is patient with them, and he's patient with us and being in our sin. And he still chooses to try and have a relationship with us, which is just blows my mind, because I know that I've sinned today, I sinned yesterday, and I'm probably going to sin tomorrow, and yet God still wants to have a relationship with me. Now we're going to go to Romans 9:20 through 21. Hopefully this will be a little bit more consecutive. But that says, but who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over its clay to make out the same lump, one vessel for honorable use and another for dishonorable use? So God made us, therefore he has rights over us. He has power over us. And it also points out that we don't have the same wisdom as our Creator. Which is, why it's foolish to question him. I'm not saying you can't ask God questions, but saying it's foolish to say, well, that's unfair that God saves some and he doesn't save other people. Because the truth is that when we're here in our earthly form, we're never going to fully be able to understand God or the spiritual world. But we can trust in God because of the word that he gives us that tells us that he is just and he is good and he is loving and that, he has a plan. So even though we may not understand everything, we can trust in him. And because of all he's done for us, obviously. But, one of the questions in the Romans For You book that goes with these two particular verses that I want you guys to discuss with each other and maybe with your parents is how these two verses humble you and make you want to exalt God, which means to lift him up and put him up. Now I'm going to read from the Romans book on page 68 if you have it, the quote towards the bottom of the page. It says, if anybody is lost, the blame is theirs. But if anyone is saved, the credit is God's. The antinomy, I can't pronounce that, contains a mystery which our present knowledge cannot solve, but it is consistent with scripture, history, and experience. That antinomy word, I'm going to be honest, I just had to look it up, but it says, it means an apparent contradiction between two beliefs or conclusions that are both reasonable and true, if you're wondering. I think that's very helpful in understanding that, if we are lost, it is our fault, but it is not our doing if we are saved. It is God's doing. So you guys should count how many times I say in this video and give you extra credit. But I'm going to read now verses 24 through 29. It says, even us whom he has called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles, as indeed he says in Hosea, those who are not my people I will call my people, and her who is not beloved I will call beloved. And in the very place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they will be called sons of the living God. So awesome. And Isaiah cries out concerning Israel, through the number of the sons of Israel by be as the sand of the sea. Only a remnant of them will be saved. For the Lord will carry out his sentence upon the earth fully and without delay. And as Isaiah predicted, and the Lord of hosts had not left us offspring, we would have been like Sodom and become like Gomorrah. So God is quoting, God is the God of the Jews, and he is the God of who is not. And he's quoting Hosea to show the Jews that God has a history of blessing those who don't deserve it. If you've ever read the book of Hosea, it's a really crazy love story where God tells Hosea to marry a prostitute, and yet Hosea still seeks her out and chooses to have a relationship with her and pursues her and loves her despite her being unfaithful. Which it's so crazy that that's such a almost perfect comparison of our relationship with God, that we're like a prostitute who's constantly unfaithful to him, but yet God still chooses to love us, that we're that bad that we're being compared to a prostitute. It's so true and so sad, and I wish in my life that I've been more faithful to God. But I hope that you guys also, every day, that you're trying to pursue God and continue building your faith every day and getting stronger. But anyways, it's God's mercy that kept Israel from being destroyed like Sodom and Gomorrah, just like it's his mercy that saves us. I'm just going to read the last paragraph on page 70, which is the last paragraph of this chapter. It says, God is a God who keeps his promises through surprising reversals. He is a God who keeps his promises in ways that cannot always be predicted, and he is a God who is utterly free to choose to give his undeserved mercy to whomever he wants, and to continue to choose to give others over to the life and the destiny that they have chosen. He always has been, in Abraham's day, Moses' time, the prophets' era, and today. And so another question for reflection from the book that I want you guys to think about is, how would you use Romans 9 to answer someone who says God is unjust? And I encourage you guys to use this time in quarantine and up through summer to prepare your hearts and your minds with God to be able to answer unbelievers' questions like that. Or even a believer might ask you that question, but to be able to help build each other up and strengthen your faith, and to help yourself be able to defend your faith. So now I'm just going to pray, and then we'll be done. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for these kids. I thank you that we're still able to have fellowship and to learn about your word, even though we can't meet in person. How awesome it is that we live in these times where we're still able to do your ministry just out of our homes, God. And I thank you so much that you've kept all of my students safe during this crazy time, that you've kept my family safe. I pray that you would continue to keep safe and healthy everyone that's watching this video. And I pray that we would just use this time to grow close to you, that I would use this time to grow closer to you. And I just pray that by the end of this, that all of these students, all the people watching this video, that they be so on fire for you, God, that they can't wait to get back into the world and share your word. In Jesus' name, amen.